We've got a solid 49ers George Kittle update and much more for you from a farm in Tennessee. Guess who lives on a farm in Tennessee? George Kittle himself. And on the Nashville-based podcast, Bussin' with the Boys, he revealed that he is going to be out of crutches entirely in just a couple of weeks. Dr. Neil Elatrosh, who's based in LA and was flying out to Florida to golf, decided to stop here in the Nashville area to see George Kittle for 45 minutes. And he said that the recovery is going perfectly and that George Kittle will play a lot of football in the 2026 season. That should be music to 49ers fans' ears. Apparently the rupture on George Kittle's Achilles was higher than they normally are, which means more blood flow, faster recovery, and they didn't have to screw into the bottom of his foot, which would have caused essentially a bone fracture and necessitated a longer recovery time. George should be out there. The 49ers have made one move at tight end so far in free agency. That has been the re-signing of Jake Tonjes to a deal that bypassed the restricted free agent tender process. They can add somebody like Kenyon Sadiq potentially. I don't know if he's going to last till number 27, but the tight end out of Oregon is an absolute freak who could play all over the field. They're saying the most athletic tight end prospect since Vernon Davis, and oh boy, would that take this 49ers offense, which has already invested a ton here in 2026 into veterans, that would potentially take it to the next level of flexibility. But George Kittle, the walking Hall of Famer, he is somebody the 49ers absolutely need as soon as possible in 2026, and the latest news on that front is indeed solid. George Kittle and Kenyon Sadiq. How about that? Kenyon Sadiq today, Daniel Jeremiah put him as a 49ers pick in his mock draft at number 27. Now, I don't know if Kenyon Sadiq, and neither does Daniel Jeremiah, he acknowledged that much. I don't know if he's going to still be on the board at number 27. Why? Well, because, I mean, he's got absolutely insane.
We've got a
metrics.
solid four.
Don't mean to play that. I mean,
guess
to
who
put
lives
something
on
else here up on the screen. I mean, to put the Kenyon Sadiq, George Kittle athletic comparison, which is absolutely jarring. Because George, coming out of Iowa in 2017, it was shocking to see him fall to the 5th round. There was some other funny business there. But the 49ers were beneficiaries of that, obviously. Look at where Kenyon Sadiq is. Obviously lighter, 241 instead of 247 pounds for Kittle. But the relative athletic score even better. And, well, let's just say that you can compare him with absolute top athletes at other positions, and he often will score better than them. Take a look at this. Faster than Odell Beckham Jr., 4.3940. Quicker than Deshaun Jackson, 1.54 10-yard split. Jackson is at a 1.55. A higher vertical jump than Julio Jones, and more explosive in the broad jump than Andre Johnson. So that is Kenyon Sadiq out of Oregon. And, you know, just we're talking tight ends today. I know that the 49ers would be absolutely thrilled. They would be probably shocked as well if Kenyon Sadiq was available at number 27. But when Daniel Jeremiah had prospects, 26 of them going to other spots ahead of the 49ers pick, I'm sure that piqued some people's interest. Anyway, George Kittle today on that Bussin' with the Boys podcast did give that promising update on his Achilles injury and on his post-surgery recovery. And he also shared that he had torn a couple of ligaments in the opposite ankle, so the opposite leg, against the Colts. We knew that Kittle had hurt his ankle against the Colts because he then was not available against the following week against the Chicago Bears. 49ers beat Chicago in that thriller without Kittle. But we found out that he actually tore a couple ankle ligaments in that game against Indianapolis. He did return against the Seattle Seahawks, and then he played and tore his Achilles against the Philadelphia Eagles. And Kittle today said something that definitely I think is going to raise some eyebrows. He said, my biggest thing on what I thought it was his Achilles. He's talking about the cause of his Achilles tear. When I played the Colts, I tore 2 ligaments in my ankle, and then I hurt it again because I kept playing on it. I was very lopsided. I was compensating really bad. So I think that was a big part of it because I was compensating for it the past 3 weeks on one ankle. All the weight was on my right side. So I was basically running with all the weight on my right side. That would be my best guess, Kittle said, as to how he tore the Achilles on the right side. We've got a couple diagrams of things that we can look at, but the very, very simple explanation that George Kittle, or theory that he put, is in graphical context right here. He, it says micro injury versus the Colts in week 17. I don't think the torn ankle ligaments are necessarily a micro injury, but he played through that. He did take the week off against the Bears. And, before anybody starts saying, oh, well, they shouldn't have let him play, I'm sure that George Kittle pushed the play. And I'm sure that your favorite players, and this goes throughout all of NFL history, are playing with injuries that are undisclosed, that people on the outside don't know about. I mean, this is football. So playing through stuff, playing hurt, the greats all do it. I mean, if you go and read all the biographies of some of these players, I'm thinking about the Steve Young biography at the top of my head right now. The amount of stuff that he played through his NFL career. I mean, if every single injury was something that kept these players out, well, then they wouldn't have careers, just because it is such a brutal and physical sport. But in the case of Kittle's injury, there was overcompensation biomechanically in the weeks following the game against the Colts, even though he missed that Bears game. And then obviously the asymmetric load led to the Achilles injury in the wild card round against the Philadelphia Eagles. But the good news is that it was a high Achilles tear, probably somewhere in this range, versus a low Achilles tear, which you'd see here would actually require a couple screws. And those would be in the bottom of the foot. And you have to break the bone to put the screws in. So those are like anchor holes that they have to drill in to the bottom of the foot. And that would require the foot to have to heal as well. That's at least another 6 weeks, might be more. Plus, there's less blood flow to this part of the leg. So the higher up it is, the more blood flow there is, and that means that the recovery can potentially be quicker. But as I always try to emphasize, I have so much respect for this game. And for whatever reason, the George Kittle update is playing on my phone. I don't need that right now. We can turn that down. But I have so much respect for the guys that play this game. It is so physically brutal, and I think that my respect for George Kittle just went up. The fact that he was trying to fight through those 2 ligaments when the 49ers, I mean, everything was on the line in that 2025 season. The fact that he was trying to fight through and deliver for the 49ers deserves a tip of the cap. And unfortunately, it ended up in a torn Achilles. And that's what George thinks, what might have been the cause. It could have just been dumb luck too, but he does think that he was overcompensating with the right leg, putting a little bit too much weight there. The good news, though, for San Francisco is that he is going to play a lot of football, according to Dr. Neil Elatrosh. And Elatrosh, he's one of the most respected surgeons in the U.S., maybe the most respected amongst athletes. He repairs ACLs, he repairs Achilles, and he came up in the Maxx Crosby discussion today. I don't know if you guys saw that, but Max, on his podcast, you should go look it up, talked about his day at Baltimore Ravens HQ. First, apparently, they flew him into Washington, D.C. instead of Baltimore. And I think it took him 2 hours to get from the D.C. airport down to Baltimore, probably because of traffic. First kind of red flag there. 2, he did not see Jesse Minter, the head coach, or Eric DeCosta, the general manager, for the first 5 hours of his visit to Team HQ. I think that's another red flag. Underwent the physical, met with the doctors, and then on his way out, he went up to see the head coach, and he said the GM, DeCosta, was just across the hallway or something, and was getting really, really weird energy from the main people in the Ravens building. And they sat him down, and they said, we really want you, but some stuff is coming up in our examination of your knee. and we're going to have to get more opinions on your knee. So Maxx Crosby left the building. He said he was scared because he thought that they had found something new in his knee and that maybe his career would be over. And of course, he called Dr. Neil Elatrosh, who performed the surgery on George Kittle's Achilles and even stopped by Nashville on his way from LA to Florida to do some golfing recently. But Elatrosh, who performed Crosby's meniscus surgery, said, and he showed him graphics and he showed him images, and he said, you have nothing to worry about. You are right on track. Of course, 9 weeks after a knee surgery, stuff is going to show up on imaging. It's, passing or failing a physical is a very subjective thing. It just, there's no actual pass or actual fail column. It is just a matter of a team collecting as much information as it can and then determining if it wants to assume the risk with the examination and the diagnosis at hand. But anyway, it'd be hard to, and impossible 9 weeks after a knee surgery to have a completely clear physical and all the imaging that goes into that. And obviously Maxx Crosby didn't have that. And the Ravens, either nefariously because they were trying to sign Trey Hendrickson and it not looking any better for them on that front. It looks like they were already working on that before Maxx Crosby was even in the building. So the Ravens, either nefariously or because they're extremely paranoid or careful with these medical situations, they decided to scuttle the deal due to the physical. That was at least the reason presented to Maxx Crosby and to the public. So anyway, Elatrosh's name came up. I will maintain my initial stance on that whole incident, and it's that players are going to always take an offer from an NFL team. And there's so many players that want to be in this league, and they are, if the Ravens want players, then they're going to be able to draft them and sign them and do all that. But there is at least going to be a double take from potential trade partners moving forward, given how murky this situation is, given how poorly this has all been explained. And then Maxx Crosby's version of events just sounded like it was sketchy all day in that Ravens building. Anyway, Maxx is back with the Raiders, and it looks like we can expect him to stay there for the time being. Now, there might have been legitimate medical red flags. He was coming off of a meniscus surgery. But the way that the Ravens handled it, and now we have the first-person account from Maxx Crosby, who I don't think has any incentive to lie about things. He was just recounting how it went in the building. I mean, I was under the impression that when somebody comes over in a trade, especially a superstar player that you send 2 first-round picks for, and he flies across country to come say hi at your facility, obviously undergo the physical and cross all the T's and dot all the I's. I was under the impression that the GM and the head coach greet him at the front door, or at least see him really, really early in the visit. The fact that it took 5 hours, I don't think that Maxx would lie about that. And I think that was a big, big red flag. Anyway, in happier news, in less sketchy news, George Kittle, also operated on by Neil Elatrosh, expected back for the 49ers. Maybe not week 1. They don't have a firm date on that, but what Elatrosh said is he's going to play a lot of football for San Francisco this year. Now, I mentioned that they had already re-signed Jake Tonjes. I also saw that, I think it was involving Baltimore today, David Njoku, the former Cleveland Brown, visited the Baltimore Ravens today. Speaking of visits, Spencer Burford, the former 49er, visited the Raiders, and it sounds like he's going to sign with Las Vegas. So we didn't expect Spencer to come back to the 49ers. He's not coming back to the 49ers, and maybe David Njoku is going to be headed to the Ravens, which could potentially still leave the 49ers very interested in adding a tight end through the NFL draft. Here's a look at the 49ers depth chart right now. We're going to focus on the tight end position for the time being. Kittle's obviously tight end 1. Tonjes re-signed as a restricted free agent, or pending restricted free agent. He bypassed that process with a 2-year contract. Is going to be the receiving tight end behind George Kittle. Luke Farrell, the team's blocking tight end. I think his play did leave something to be desired last year. As of right now, I've got Braden Willis making the 53-man roster, but the 49ers, who have typically carried 4 tight ends on the 53, I think could definitely use another body at this position. And that obviously, if everybody were healthy, would move Braden Willis down the pecking order. Maybe even if you drafted Kenyon Sadiq, if you're the 49ers, if he somehow fell to number 27, Luke Farrell does not have any guaranteed money this year. The 49ers owe some kind of option. I could look it up to give you guys the exact information. The 49ers, though, owe some kind of option to Luke Farrell late in training camp, which means that they don't have to make a decision on Farrell until August. So they can continue to collect information, see how the NFL draft goes. But, I mean, while Daniel Jeremiah is fresh off of that mock draft with Kenyon Sadiq heading to the 49ers in that mock draft, we might as well discuss this. Here's what he said. He could go much higher than 27th overall. He's undersized, but he has outstanding speed and is a competitive blocker. And I've got some tape of Kenyon Sadiq, the blocker, and I think that's one of the most important things. They're not going to draft a tight end, especially somebody high up that can't block. He would be the ultimate chess piece for Kyle Shanahan, giving the coach a hybrid of George Kittle and Kyle Juszczyk. All right, so what we know of the crazy numbers here. Here's the faster than OBJ, quicker than Deshaun Jackson, more explosive than Andre Johnson, and can jump higher than Julio Jones. I mean, you look at some of the historical modeling of athleticism. It's better than other very talented tight ends who are fairly recent products of the NFL draft, including Kyle Pitts, Colston Loveland, and Tyler Warren. The 9.58 relative athletic score with the 4.39 40. I mean, people start to put this into Vernon Davis territory for Kenyon Sadiq, even though I think that Vernon Davis, we need to be very, very respectful of what he brought to the table athletically, because Vernon Davis did all of this, but he did it at a heavier weight. He did it at above 250 pounds. So Vernon Davis was a monster, the likes of which we may never see again in the NFL because the positions have downsized. There's a little less physicality in the league now. It is more speed-oriented, so guys are lighter. So Sadiq comes in at 241 pounds. And, I mean, everything that he's doing is wildly impressive. Odell Beckham Jr. wasn't 241 pounds when he was running a 4.4, that's for sure. So he's running these receiver-like times and delivering these explosive metrics that would be impressive even for a guy who's about 30 to 40 pounds lighter, yet he's doing it at 241. But we do have to really emphasize that he is not the same size and same weight as somebody like Vernon Davis, who was more, 6'4", 6'5", 250 plus. But this is indeed an elite athlete, and we have some tape that Mike was able to prepare of Kenyon Sadiq blocking, which, again, we can talk all we want about the metrics and the speed and the explosion, but if you can't translate it to being a football player blocking on the field, then it's not going to mean anything, especially for Kyle Shanahan. And I think right here, you've got a guy who, he's just going to drive the linebacker. Is that Jordan James, by the way? Did Jordan James wear the 23 in college? That might have been Jordan James. I actually was at Jordan James High School here in the Nashville area last night. It's in Brentwood. It's called Brentwood Academy. And I didn't see any Jordan James stuff there. He only played two years at Brentwood Academy. But my buddy Leo, shout out to him. He's a basketball trainer. He's one of the best in the country. I think he's the best basketball shooting specialist in the country. And he was working a client out at the basketball gym there. So we went and checked it out and then went out to dinner and got to see the alma mater of Jordan James himself. Also happens to be the alma mater of Lombardi herself. So let me answer some questions today. Let's have some fun with this. I know that I just talked for about 20 minutes. We got the good news on George Kittle. We have the initial Daniel Jeremiah mock draft. I'm sure he's already done plenty of those, but he'll do plenty more moving forward. And it just piqued my interest that Kenyon Sadiq was part of it. We can talk Maxx Crosby. We can talk Spencer Burford, likely heading to the Raiders. And we could also look at Mike's comment. He said that Tonjes could potentially be a Kyle Juszczyk replacement in 2027, a chess piece. Now, I think the one issue is that Jake is taller than Kyle Juszczyk. Like Luke Farrell is taller than Kyle Juszczyk. And I don't know if that's an advantage for playing the fullback role as Kyle Shanahan sees it. I think that Kyle Shanahan is doing a lot of blocking behind the line of scrimmage with the fullback. He's doing a lot of cross-line, cross-formational stuff with the fullback, having to pick up a defensive end on the opposite side of where he lines up. And I think that Kyle Juszczyk uses the fact that he is not 6'5", he's more of a 6'1" kind of guy. He uses that lower center of gravity to leverage himself for some of the more difficult blocks, which are different than the ones that even an inline tight end is going to be asked to make. So when Juszczyk gets hurt, yes, a tight end is the body type that gets moved into that position, but I don't think that the 49ers operate nearly as efficiently as when Kyle Juszczyk, with his more of a fullback frame at 6'1", is able to execute some of those blocks. So Tonjes is the direct backup to Kyle Juszczyk, sure, but as far as succeeding Kyle Juszczyk, it's going to be really hard. And, you know, Kyle, I don't know how they determine the Hall of Fame now for fullbacks, but hopefully, you know, I don't have much faith in awards processes. Kyle Juszczyk has been in this league since 2014. Kyle Juszczyk signed, maybe it was 2013, actually. He was 2016, 15, 14, yeah, 13. 2013 was his rookie year. He came out of Harvard where he was a slot receiver. Played for the Ravens 4 years. And now is entering season 10 with the 49ers. He has been the best fullback in the league for over a decade. Just, I mean, think about that. If he doesn't end up in the Hall of Fame, then the Hall of Fame is stat counting. And I know that a lot of these awards, unfortunately, like the MVP, there's way too much stat counting going on. People aren't actually watching tape. But if Kyle Juszczyk, who will have a decade and a half in the NFL under his belt very, very soon, if he doesn't end up in the Hall of Fame on the first ballot, I think that, and we already know, again, that there are major problems, but I think that there are major, major problems with the way that the people who are selecting this watch the game of football. I mean, the fact that Frank Gore was not on the Hall of Fame in the first ballot is an insanity. It's a travesty. I mean, the guy is damn near the top rusher of all time. He's got 16,000 career yards. He was a model of durability in a sport where it's not easy to stay healthy. I think the stat counting is absolutely unhinged at this point. And I don't know if fantasy football has made it worse. And here's another crazy thing. With Frank Gore, even if you count the stats, he should be in the Hall of Fame. But what these people are doing are saying, well, he didn't get them quickly enough. They're so focused on numbers that they lose sight of the fact that being a warrior, like physically, like stepping out onto the field, taking hits for 16 years is something that the normal human and even the typical player cannot do and survive for that long and continue playing at high level. 16,000 yards in 16 years for Frank Gore. And when there is such a lack of appreciation for how difficult football actually is, even amongst Hall of Fame voters, then it probably is going to be a lack of appreciation for a guy who contributes most beyond the stat sheet, like a Kyle Juszczyk. But now that Mike said that Kyle Juszczyk is entering his final year under contract, I felt that I had to deliver that. Those who watch film, those who watch tape and understand how some of this blocking has to work, who understand the difficulty of what a Kyle Juszczyk is asked to do, think that he's massively, massively underrated, which is funny because those who don't know what they're watching will say that he's overrated and overpaid. But the truth is actually the opposite. He is underrated and underpaid because fullbacks just don't make that much money. He's making $4.25 million per year. Kyle Juszczyk should absolutely be paid at least on the tight end scale. In a just world, that would be the case. In a just world, he'd be making $10 million more per year. In a just world, that would have been $10 million more over the past decade. That would have been $100 million more for Kyle Juszczyk. But he has just put his head down and continued grinding, and he's one of the most valuable players, I think, in the league. He has been for the 49ers. It just is that he's not scoring touchdowns and catching the football and running the ball at the same rate as receivers and running backs. So the vast majority of people don't pay as much attention to that, but he is making a lot of the magic happen with some of the difficult blocks. I'll give you an example. Against the Cincinnati Bengals in week 2 of the 2019 season, the 49ers had a touchdown play. I think it was the Marquise Goodwin. I forgot who Jimmy Garoppolo threw to, but it was a crosser where Carlos Dunlap, who was in the prime of his career back then, was coming off the edge for Cincinnati. Kyle Juszczyk, the only way that he was able to spring Marquise Goodwin or whoever the receiver was that open was because he left the edge rusher completely unblocked. He focused the pass protection from the offensive lineman on the other side, but he was counting on Kyle Juszczyk to come across the entire formation and take out an edge rusher, something that offensive tackles in this league struggle to do. And Juszczyk, not only was he not positioned to take Carlos Dunlap on mano a mano, he had to move, get to the other side from the left shoulder to the right shoulder of the quarterback and, use his target radar to lock on to Dunlap and take him out before he got to Jimmy Garoppolo. Dunlap thought that he had a free route to Jimmy Garoppolo to blow up the play in less than 2.5 seconds. And it turned out that, he didn't, because Kyle Juszczyk got in his way. And that's something that the casuals are never going to give Kyle Juszczyk credit for. But especially back then in 2019, there was only one fullback in the entire league who was able to make that block. And Kyle Juszczyk executed it to perfection. All right, now we really can get to that Q&A. When do we think that we're going to be getting the update on Trent? Well, Trent's $10 million option bonus is due by this Friday, March 20th. So I have a feeling that we're going to get an update on Thursday, March 19th. I would set your notifications. I would set your alerts for that time, because typically the day before these bonuses trigger is when we hear of movement happening. I don't think the 49ers want to let this $10 million payment go before they have a firm agreement or plan with Trent Williams moving forward. It would seem, based on everything that I've written, it would seem that that's something that the 49ers would be very incentivized by, right? We got another comment here. Kyle Juszczyk is possibly the most versatile fullback that's ever played. He's a fullback, tight end, and a slot receiver. Bill Walsh would have loved to coach Juice with his versatility. Yes. You guys know that Kyle Shanahan was born the year that Bill Walsh took over the 49ers in 1979? Just a fun little piece of trivia. I can give you guys the look at the 49ers depth chart here at offensive line, by the way. There's been some discussion as of late. Oh, there's Kenyon. Well, Mike, tell me if that's Jordan James or not in Oregon. Because if that's Jordan James, that's really cool. That means that we'll play it again. But I am going to go back to here. I forgot what number James wore in college. So I want to know. Mike is going to look that up. I don't follow the college game as religiously, so when I see an Oregon, then I need to do my number check. Mike is going to look that up for us. Meanwhile, we're going to look at the 49ers offensive line. There is some speculation, and I don't think that it's unfair at all, that Brett Toth is going to be the 49ers starting left guard. In fact, if the season started today, Brett Toth, whom they signed away from the Philadelphia Eagles, would be that starting left guard. I think unquestionably. The contract details for Toth came out today, and $2.5 million, all of which he'll probably earn if he can stay healthy. There's at least $2.1 or $2.2 million guaranteed, is going to be heading Brett Toth's way. And although I would say that that is high-level swing interior lineman money, so backup money, there are starters, including the 49ers starter from just last year, Ben Barch, who played on a much lower salary. And no update, that was not Jordan James. Jordan James wore number 20 at Oregon. And now I remember watching some tape of Jordan James, and I remember the 20, but he's 23 with the 49ers. So no, he's not. Jordan James is obviously McCaffrey's 23. What number is Jordan James, Mike? Is he 22? He's not wearing 20 for the 49ers. I know that for sure. I thought that he might have worn 23 in college, but it was 20. Anyway, the offensive line for San Francisco, they paid Ben Barch last year 1.2 million or so. That most of it was guaranteed for Ben Barch, but he was the odds-on favorite to be the starting left guard at the beginning of the year, and he ended up being the starting left guard for San Francisco. So the fact that Toth has over $2 million guaranteed for the 49ers, I think is a significant deal. Now, we talk about Joel Bitonio potentially being available. The issue is that Joel Bitonio is contemplating retirement. The Browns let his contract expire, like void, because he had these void years in the contract, and then he had a void date after the final year under contract, and the void date was after the regular season to give him a chance to see if he would retire or not, and he didn't give the Cleveland Browns an answer. So the void date hit, and they took on a bunch of dead money that was already staved off into the future. The Browns, I think, based on what I have read, based on what I understand, do not expect Joel Bitonio to play for them next year. They think that he would have at least been in better communication about his future had he been thinking about playing for them. So probably going to retire, it sounds like, but maybe not. And he's still playing high-level football. He was the best member of that Browns offensive line just this past year. And I think that the Stefanski system, offensive line-wise, I think there could be some good carryover to what Kyle Shanahan is running. And the 49ers have had holes at either guard position, left guard or right guard, fairly consistently over the past few years. Now, I don't know how much money Joel Bitonio would want. Maybe it is a certain amount of money that he would require to continue playing. He's going to be 35. Again, he was still good last year. He's no longer in the prime of his career. And we haven't had a chance to talk to Kyle Shanahan and Chris Foerster yet, but I'm sure they really, really like Brett Toth. He started 4 games and played well for the Philadelphia Eagles last year. I mean, again, crazier things have happened. Ben Barch, at about half of Toth's salary, was the 49ers starting left guard in 2025. But I'm not quite penciling Toth into that left guard 1 role yet. I've got that empty, and I've got the gray shading there because I think there's still uncertainty there. 2 spots of uncertainty there, and the safety position where the 49ers right now have Marquise Siegel penciled in, but they have Jair Brown on the roster. Malik Mustafa. We're going to feature some safeties that are going to be prospects in the NFL draft over the course of the next month. For today, though, we feature Kenyon Sadiq. We talked about him a lot, and, I mean, he would fit in right here for the 49ers. And if you cut Luke Farrell, maybe the 49ers would just go straight to Kittle and Kenyon Sadiq with Jake Tonjes as their backup tight end. I mean, that's how insanely athletic Kenyon Sadiq is. I don't know how quickly he would develop and transition to the NFL game. That's all research the 49ers have to do. But just given some of those scary, scary athletic metrics, I mean, we've got all of this stuff right here. You've got to think that if he somehow drops to 27, it might even be a no-brainer pick for the 49ers. What is the chance that the 49ers are going to sign Joey Bosa? I think it's solid. I think that they need to get Joey at a certain price for it to make sense. They went after him last year. I think they were ready to offer about $10 million. I think they even offered about $10 million to Joey. He took $13 million from Buffalo. Joey just put together a season that got him voted to the Pro Bowl. He had 5 forced fumbles for Buffalo. Remember last year, Joey Bosa was coming off of like consecutive, very injury-riddled seasons with the Chargers. So his value was at an all-time low last year when he did hit that free agent market. He played most of the season for Buffalo, 5 forced fumbles, way more snaps than he had had in years. It was a generally healthy season for Joey Bosa. And given the Pro Bowl nod, I think that it's reasonable to say that he might want a little bit more money than he did last year with the Bills, even though he's a year older, because he proved some durability. So this could be a $15 million player. Then you ask yourself, do the 49ers have $15 million in the budget? Because it's not just about the 49ers salary cap room here in 2026, which I can show you on this sheet. As you can see, they've got, this is an estimate, by the way, because not all the contracts are in here. They've got $28.3 million left to spend this year. It's not just about that. It's about next year where they, you see these liabilities, $311 million for the 49ers. Next year, they already have $335 million in liabilities spread out over 37 players. So the 2027 calendar year and season for the 49ers is going to be a big time salary mathematical challenge. The way that, and so they're already over the projected cap, by the way, in 2027. And they probably won't get $20.7 million of adjustments in 2027. So they're going to have to carry over a lot of space. They had to carry over $20 million from 2024 to 2025 or 2025 to 2026 to make 2026 work. And right now, obviously, it's working. To take the next step from 26 to 27, they're going to have to carry over at least the same amount based on some of the projections that I see. So when they have 28.3 million estimated right now, that doesn't mean that they have 28.3 million to spend. That means that the 49ers have to keep the carryover amount at above, I think, 20 million. That was my challenge for everybody in the roster builder. And I think that's my challenge for the 49ers right now. So you can't just go out and sign Joey Bosa to a massive role that's going to demand $15 million a year. Joey Bosa, I think the budget for the 49ers, and this is not just the financial budget, this is the snap count budget too, is as a third defensive end, somebody who's not a featured player on that defensive line, but somebody who rotates in, wants to play with his brother, wants to win a championship, wants to stay fresh, because I think that might have been an issue for him last year. I mean, he had to play a lot of snaps last year, and I don't think his play at the end of the season was as good at the start of it. He forced 4 fumbles in the first 4 games, by the way, for Buffalo last year. And that type of rotational player, somebody that can inject the 49ers with just a little bit of extra energy, just a little bit of extra pass rush that they need on those pass rushing downs, where I think they want somebody who can perform the versatile array of tasks that Joey Bosa can perform. I think that type of player is about a $10 million player. I don't know if they were going to ask Bryce Huff to take a pay cut before he retired. I don't know if they're going to trade him. I know that they probably wanted a little bit more versatility out of that particular spot. But Huff had been due to make $17 million. We saw that number as potentially problematic for the 49ers. We never found out if it actually was because he retired. Anyway, now for a player who would essentially replace Huff, not necessarily on a depth chart, because Joey Bosa is a different type of end, but on the financial pecking order, now we could see exactly how much money the 49ers had budgeted for that spot in their spreadsheet. And maybe it's 12. Maybe it's 13 like Buffalo last year. But I think it's probably closer to 10. And whether or not Joey Bosa would accept that is up to anybody's guess at this point. We don't have any other clues from Cheryl Bosa at this moment, but she definitely would like to see both of her sons in a 49ers uniform come 2026. Bosa squared, as Kurt says, would be Bosa squared plus Osa, right? You got Osa Odigizua on the inside now. He's going to be making $16.75 million. You got Nick Bosa, whose salary cap hit has been adjusted. It's $23 million this year. A lot of that money deferred against the cap to later. And I think that Joey, you always try to, it's healthy for the roster to have the salary cap numbers generally reflective, especially once a player is further into his contract, generally reflective of his worth in that particular season. So you would want Joey's, obviously, on a short deal, unless it's extremely prorated into the future to save room. But I think you would want Joey's in there definitely under that $15 million apron, and probably closer to 10 based on what the 49ers were willing to pay last year. Yeah, Bosa's mom also put a picture up last year. Wasn't the same one exactly, but it was a similar one, and then he ended up signing with Buffalo. It probably is going to end up coming down to money, and the 49ers need to have a limit. They can't just go get Joey Bosa because they feel that they should have Nick's brother on the team. That's a terrible way of doing business. They've got to be smart about this. They have to find players. Like, the one amazing thing about this entire free agency period. And this is the first time that something like this has happened in my 10 years covering the 49ers. There's not a single gluttonous overpay on this free agency list. And normally to compete in free agency, you do have to splurge. The 49ers haven't splurged, and they've gotten a lot of players. I mean, let's go through some of these contracts for San Francisco. We can go straight to the 53-man roster. Vidarian Lowe. They definitely didn't splurge there. They paid him solid swing tackle money, but he's definitely not being paid as a starting offensive lineman. I don't think that's the plan. I think they're trying to lower Trent Williams' cap hit and get that figured out for 2026. Christian Kirk, 1 year up to $6 million. This is for a guy who has two 1,000-yard receiving seasons under his belt. We understand that he's past his prime, but he's not being asked to play one of the featured spots. He's being asked to play the F receiver, and he's being asked to compete and help bring along some of the younger guys. And he had a massive, massive game in the postseason. He scored touchdowns in both postseason games for the Houston Texans this year. Up to $6 million is not a bad, that's a cost-efficient deal for the 49ers. We're going to get the exact numbers, but I guarantee you that the guaranteed money is less than $6 million for Christian Kirk. Brett Toth, good lineman, $2.5 million. That's the maximum value of the deal. That's also a cost-efficient deal. We're waiting on Dre Greenlaw numbers, but it's going to be up to $7.5 million. I highly doubt that all of that $7.5 million is standard salary. I think there are probably considerable incentives in that deal for Dre Greenlaw. Nate Hobbs, $4 million, right? But that's maximum value for a premium position for a guy who was on a 4-year, $48 million contract prior to this. That's $12 million APY. That's a third of the price with a quarter of the commitment coming from the 49ers for Nate Hobbs. Corliss Waitman, the punter, we don't have those numbers yet, but those are going to be punters' numbers. They don't have much to do with any of this. And of course, you could say that the two crown jewels of this acquisition class, Mike Evans at a severe discount, $14 million per year, only $14.3 million fully guaranteed, and Osa Odigizua, they just inherited the contract from the Cowboys, $16.75 million base salary this year. That actually can be restructured if they need to create a little bit more room in the near term, but you've got to be careful with those. You never want the sink to overflow in any given year. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. This has been fun. We'll see if Mike has any extra news. I always need to check before I sign out. No, Mike says that Joey just needs to have a smaller role. Spencer Burford is officially signed with the Raiders. We did talk about that, and we now know that Jordan James wore number 20 with the Oregon Ducks. Jordan James with the 49ers, to answer the question. I'm looking at some images here. 29. That I knew it wasn't the standard number 20. Of course, 23 belongs to Christian McCaffrey. 29 is the number for Jordan James, who saw his career debut in the playoffs against the Seattle Seahawks. So crazy stuff going on around the NFL. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Join Highway 101. Let's get us to 102. It doesn't sound as good as 101, but we're plowing on forward. Time to eat some dinner. I'll talk to you guys soon.